Good evening. I'm really happy that y'all could be here tonight. I am Dawn Quinn and John Tapley, and I are the PTSA co-presidents for Walton High School this year. And we want to welcome all the families and our distinguished guests and speakers. And thank you all for coming out tonight. Thank you for coming out tonight as part of our to attend our Substance Abuse Prevention Forum. A day doesn't go by that you hear about the growing drug addiction problem that has impacted so many promising young lives. And I can't help but ask, how can we stop this epidemic? And what can I do as a parent to ensure my son never has the experience of the consequences of substance abuse? And we are bringing this program to the community with the primary objective to arm parents and students with the information and real-life stories that we hope will help young adults make smart decisions and stay away from drugs and alcohol. John? Can you hear us okay?
Can you hear?
The mic is not up.
on. How about that?
Oh, and you can still hear me. What does that say?
I thought that was kind of low. Good evening. Thank you all for being here tonight, and thank you for the introduction, Dawn. First, I wanted to mention that the slides you're seeing up above, these are all images that are part of a new substance abuse prevention program the PTSA rolled out recently, and it's been branded as Choose You Drug Free. And we're going to be at the tables outside afterwards, so stop by and talk to us more about that when we finish up here. It took a lot of hands to make this happen tonight, so we want to thank our school administration, the faculty, the parents, and the staff. Everybody worked extremely hard, and Dawn gave me this script to read. I'm going off script right now for a minute. I want to say thank you, because Dawn worked really hard putting this together. This is not a comfortable topic. You know, it's not easy to talk about. And I think, you know, we can feel insulated here in our East Cobb community, you know, cozy community, like this doesn't happen. But it does, and we're here to talk about it tonight, so thank you for being here. Some of us may have been impacted, and many of us could be in the future. So it's a very important topic, and so thank you, Dawn. Appreciate you bringing this forward. We'd also like to thank Georgia State Senator Kay Kirkpatrick for being here. And I think Scott's here, isn't he? Yeah. Scott Sweeney may be here a little bit later. I think there was a traffic accident that backed things up. And a big thank you to all the speakers here dedicated to this significant issue. This is worthwhile, and thank you so much for being here tonight. Now I want to introduce our moderator, JoAnne Hammermaster. I got that right. She's a parent of a senior here at Walton and has been a member of the Walton Wellness Advisory Council for the past few years. She is past Health and Wellness Chair for the Georgia PTA and is the current Walton PTSA Health and Wellness Committee co-chair. And JoAnne is the co-founder and executive director of a nonprofit called Real Food for Kids, which works collaboratively with school districts to advocate for more fresh, whole foods for our students and teaches students and their families about making healthy choices. And I got to put in a plug for her salad bar. Is it called, what sensation?
Creation Station.
Creation Station. I get that wrong every time, but it's a new salad bar we got with a new building, and everybody raves about it. It's a nice, healthy option for all of our kids and all the faculty here for lunch, so turn it over to you.
Thank you, John. It's really a pleasure to be here this evening. I know this is a difficult subject, but I think it's really important that we're here, so thank you for taking time out of your busy evenings to be here tonight. We know there is a big backup on 120, so hopefully more people who had said they're coming will be trickling in. We're going to go ahead and get started because we're on a tight timeline this evening. I also, I am a parent here. I have a son who is a senior. I also have a daughter who is in college. And, over the years, my husband and I have tried to lay groundwork on substance abuse awareness, but we know it could happen to our kids. And so I think it's important for all of us to be aware, and that's why we're here this evening with this great panel who can answer a lot of questions for us, provide a lot of important information. So just to let you know a little bit about the format this evening, each speaker will have about 7 to 10 minutes to talk about their area of expertise. Then we're going to have a question and answer session following. You may have seen coming in, you can get a note card. If you have a question that you would like to have addressed this evening, please raise your hand to get a note card, or if you're ready to have that note card picked up, we have some great volunteers here this evening who can pick those up for you. And we will try to get all of our questions answered this evening. If we do not have time, once we have to get out of this area right here, we'll have about 20 minutes afterwards in the foyer, out here outside of the theater, where you can meet the speakers, ask them questions directly, meet some of the people in the recovering community to ask them questions, and get some other resources you might need. So on that note, I would like to introduce our first speaker. And that is Missy Owen right here, who I've known for a while. She is the co-founder and CEO of the Davis Direction Foundation, which was founded in March 2014 after the fatal overdose of her son, Davis. The foundation drives 5 priority areas: prevention, education, advocacy, harm reduction, and recovery. In 2016, the Davis Direction Foundation opened the doors to The Zone, a recovery community organization. The facility provides the community a safe and sober environment to remain in recovery. Missy has spent 26 years as a school counselor and also 7 years teaching elementary school. She has served on multiple task force collaboratives and spent countless hours as a board member to provide community solutions addressing the opioid, heroin, national health crisis. With that, I will turn it over to Missy.
Thank you, JoAnne. And I'm thankful to be here tonight to be able to share my story with all of you. As JoAnne said, my name is Missy Owen, and I've been a resident of Cobb since, I guess, 1986, when I started teaching first grade at Kennesaw Elementary. I moved to Big Shanty Elementary, where I became a professional school counselor and ended my career at Hayes Elementary. So I officially made just about every elementary school in Kennesaw and raised tons and tons of those kids through the elementary school system there. And all the while I was teaching drug education to the children in the schools, even as early as kindergarten. So I'm here to tell you tonight that addiction, especially opioid addiction, is an equal opportunity destroyer. My husband and I have been together 27 years. We've raised 5 kids together, and they were in Sunday school and church every single Sunday of their lives. They had opportunities for East Cobb baseball, competitive cheerleading, Saturday school at Georgia State University. They had opportunities through Broadway shows to you name it. I have 2 presidential scholars at Georgia Tech, one at FSU who's a presidential scholar, and I had the 2016 Best Actress in the State Award for the Schulers. So my family was one that was full of opportunity, and to my knowledge, we raised them the best that we could and did all the right things and gave them the opportunities that they could. And I'm here to tell you that 1 out of every 10 people are genetically predisposed to addiction. And what that means is some people just have a better chance of becoming that person than others. And unfortunately, that's what happened to my oldest son, Davis. So as a result of Davis and his overdose, I delved into research and finding what I had done wrong, what I had missed, where I had neglected to do something that I should have done. And what I learned was that the most important lesson that I think I learned was that I didn't know how much I did not know. So I'm glad you're here tonight, because if and when addiction strikes your family, it's too late to do your research, because all you're doing at that point is chasing your child. You're trying to keep them alive and trying to figure out what their next move is so you can preempt their next move. So it's a journey, it's a personal journey. Every person's journey of addiction and recovery is different, but I'm here to tell you that recovery is real. I work amongst it every day. I see people who have been in the throes of addiction and thought that their world was hopeless come back and do amazingly incredible things. The Zone is Cobb County's only recovery community organization, and we're working with the Lieutenant Governor's Health Reform Task Force right now to become a state model and replicate our program and take it throughout the state, because at the Zone we offer resources and support that help people in recovery stay in recovery. People get sober in treatment centers, but they get well in communities. So the Davis Direction Foundation is excited to build a community of recovery in Cobb, and we are doing an amazing job because of the response that we've had from the citizens of Cobb County. And we've been recognized statewide and nationally, and we're ready to teach other people how this generous community came together to help build a community that embraces, supports, and loves people in recovery.
Thank you, Missy. I have to say, I admire this lady so much for her courage and determination to make a difference in our community that is now spreading to the state, and also hopefully will be a national model. I think it's really important for everything that you've done. Next, I'd like to introduce Dr. Gary Dudley, who is the founder of the Atlanta Area Psychological Associates, a group composed of counselors, psychologists, and social workers. Dr. Dudley considers himself to be first a teacher and has a special interest in early intervention and treatment of adolescent substance abuse. After graduating from The Ohio State University, he became a public school teacher and a school counselor and received his master's degree and doctorate of clinical psychology from the University of Miami. Dr. Dudley?
Yes, thank you for inviting me to be here. I'm happy all of you decided to come out tonight, despite the traffic that I sat in for about an hour and 20 minutes to get here. If you live in Atlanta, that's an old story. They gave me a list of topics that I might want to touch on tonight, and the first one was the effects of drugs on the developing brain, and I decided not to talk about that very much because I don't have very good self-control, and I like to talk about 14 hours if we're going to talk about brain, because what neurosciences and neuropsychology has learned about brain development and brain function just during the span of my career dwarfs all of the information that we had about the human brain before my career. And I'm talking about in human history. Neuropsychology and neuroscience is an exploding discipline. I think the one thing that I would want you to take home about brain development, though, is that there is a process in brain development that doesn't really begin until children are about 12 or 13 years of age. And that process is called myelination. And it involves the coating of neurons in the brain with a sort of a fatty sheath. And it has the function of speeding up the information flow in the human brain so that thinking quicker, thinking better, thinking more efficiently in line with all the other processes that are taking place in the brain. And it is unfortunate that this process begins in the occipital lobes, which is the rear of your head, the back, and that's mostly responsible for visual processing, and it proceeds forward. So most people know that the frontal lobes are important for judgment and decision making, and unfortunately the frontal lobes are the last part of the brain that gets the benefit of myelinization. And this is one explanation for why 15 and 16-year-olds think it's a pretty good idea to stand on top of a moving car. Because they don't get the judgment and decision-making capacity till they're in their late teens, and then they start to build their repertoire of experience. But I don't think that's the most important thing to talk about when it comes to substance abuse. I think the most important thing to talk about is when and how you should be talking about alcohol and drugs. Everybody knows now that alcohol is still the favorite and the first kind of substance that kids get involved with, and you know, that's usually mid-teens. There are children as young as 9 and 10 and 11 and 12 who are consuming alcohol. Weed is very prevalent in this day and time, and you know, the effects on the developing brain with marijuana are largely unknown. But I think we should start talking about alcohol and drugs in our families when our children are about 4 and 5 years of age, you know, when they can form full sentences and when they are listening to you, because as a parent, your influence on your children is the greatest during the first 8 to 10 years of their lives. Children in this age range will listen to everything you say and write it in their brain and believe it 100%. And unfortunately, when you see the arrival of the first zit, that means that they've awakened and now they know everything. And so you can't teach anything else. So if we wait until 12 or 13 or 11 to start talking about drugs, we're not going to have any effect at all, because the adolescent, when the parent starts to talk with them on this topic, does the recognizable eye roll and knows that the parents are preaching again. So there's no talking to an adolescent, there's preaching, because that's how they hear that. On the other hand, if we're talking about alcohol and drugs in the family environment, around the dinner table, when the children are very young, and they hear information about alcohol and drugs during these years where they're listening to what you say rather than trying to get out of the room when you're talking, we're going to have more of an impact because they write that information in their brain. And one of the things I should say about that is it's important to realize that it's not necessary to talk to children. In this age range, 5 to 10 years, they listen much more closely when you are talking to your mate, see, or a neighbor, or a dinner guest. That's what they listen to. And if you really want to make sure that they hear you, whisper it to your mate, because that's what they listen to the most. Kids come into my office and they're sitting on the floor playing with some of the things around there, and the parents want them to sit up and listen to what the doctor said. I said, no, he's fine, let him go, because he's listening very carefully. And I know that because at the end of my visits, I usually ask the children a few questions about what they've heard, and they can give you a real good recitation. So they hear it all. They don't have to be sitting up and listening. And the things we say about it doesn't really matter very much as long as it's factual. Because kids really know when you're running a number on them. You cannot fool an 8-year-old. So if you're running garbage, they'll get that as garbage and they won't tend to it very much. But give them facts or give them examples from things that have happened in life. Somebody came into the office today and said they caught their child in the liquor closet and got really sick drunk and had to go to the hospital. And you know, you're just talking with your mate about what an unfortunate thing that was, dangerous. People were sad, all the kinds of things that surround those kinds of news stories, and the children are taking that in, and it's in their experience. So it's important to develop that conversation while they're still listening to what you say. If you wait until they're adolescents, it's way too late. They don't use you as a source of information except in, you know, fairly rare conditions, because adolescents get all their information from other adolescents. And I could tell hundreds of horror stories about that. One of the problems that is prevalent in the middle schools and high schools right now is sharing of medicines. And I hope these aren't medicines that they got out of the family medicine cabinet, because if you're not locking up your medicines, you might as well unlock your guns too, because they're equally dangerous. And a lot of drugs that get sold in the schools by middle schoolers and high schoolers came out of the family medicine cabinet, and the kids that are using them have no idea what it is or what it's supposed to do. And obviously that can be lethal. But the most prevalent drug of sale is probably in the category of the psychostimulants. And this is a medicine that's used to treat a common neurodevelopmental problem. And most people already know of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. And it tends to be somewhat overdiagnosed in our community. Has a prevalence of about 5%. And sharing of this drug is common because it helps them study and focus with their study. It's a performance-enhancing drug. One of the things we need to remember is that children are more likely to abuse alcohol and drugs if they have an untreated neurodevelopmental problem. So if there is concern about a problem by the time a child is 5, 6, 7, or 8, get it assessed, figure out what it is, because if medicine is appropriate, and they get medicine and psychotherapy, that significantly reduces their risk of becoming addicted in early adolescence. Okay?
Thank you. Our next speaker is Greg Epstein. He's been the Assistant District Attorney here in Cobb County for 10 years and is currently assigned to major narcotics and the organized crime trial team. He was previously assigned to the Special Victims Unit. His legal background includes corporate litigation and case prosecution, such as DUI to murder. He's involved as an instructor for law enforcement on search and seizure, domestic violence, and asset forfeiture. He graduated from the University of Michigan Law School.
Thank you. Thank you. Everybody hearing me okay? All right. Thank you all very much for being here. I appreciate the opportunity to talk with you about this, but unfortunately I'm going to have to start with some very grim numbers. According to the Cobb County Medical Examiner in 2016, there were 141 deaths related to alcohol or drugs. 89% of those were determined to be an accident, which would cover overdoses. 25 involved alprazolam, which is Xanax, if you're not familiar. 41 involved fentanyl. 38 involved heroin. Most of them involved what was called multi-drug toxicity. There was more than one drug involved. In 2016, there were 50% of drug deaths involved heroin, fentanyl, or both, which is a 22% increase over 2015. The unit I work with, Marietta Cobb Smyrna Narcotics, year to date, has seized 1,374.9 grams of heroin. Why do I say 0.9? Because the average street dose of heroin is about 0.1 or 0.2 grams. For historical perspective, that number is higher than the combined amount of heroin seized between 2012 and 2014, just by MCS, not by regular street patrol. Those 3 years is 3 times the amount of heroin that was seized between 1995 and 2011, excuse me. When they talk about the growing heroin epidemic, that's what it looks like. Year to date, we've seized more than 42 kilograms of methamphetamine in Cobb County. Again, that's just the drug task force. Total street value of the drugs seized by the task force this year in Cobb County is more than $7 million. Precinct 4, which covers the Walton School District, year to date, 501 drug arrests, covering every type of drug. Nationwide, in 2016, there were approximately 64,000 overdose deaths. That's a 22% increase over 2015, and it is now the leading cause of death for Americans under the age of 50. It is driven in great part by heroin and by fentanyl. In case you haven't heard about fentanyl, it does have legal use. It is used as a painkiller, but it has to be dosed very carefully because it can be absorbed through breathing it in, it can be absorbed by touching it, and it can kill you either way. It is often found in other drugs. Someone may think they're buying heroin. It's actually laced with fentanyl. They take what they believe to be a dose that is safe for them, and it can kill them. Also, this is why if you see anything that looks like drugs out on the street, please don't touch it. Don't go near it. Call the police so that they can take it out of harm's way safely. I can't tell you how many cases we've had where a suspect is being pursued in a drug investigation, as they're literally being pursued down the street, throw something down, as they run away, throw something out the window of a car as they drive away. Just leave it out on the street for whoever to come along and find it. So now I'm going to tell you a little bit about some of the legal consequences for various drug offenses. I'm a lawyer, I have to tell you, this is not legal advice or legal opinion, it's just informational. But I want to start off with what's called trafficking. In Georgia, when we think of trafficking, if you're old enough, you think of Miami Vice. It's not, trafficking in Georgia, though, does not necessarily mean whether or not you're dealing it or selling it. It is purely, do you possess more than a certain amount? For cocaine and heroin, for example, if you have more than 28 grams, 28 grams is roughly an ounce. The sentence, minimum mandatory prison sentence, is 10 years. You get parole, but it's 10 years. The maximum for that is 30 years. For heroin, if it's over 4 grams, and by point of reference, a sugar packet is roughly 2 to 4 grams. Okay? For heroin, more than 4 grams is 5 years. Cocaine and meth, if it's over 200 grams, minimum of 15 years. Over 400 grams, minimum of 25. For heroin, if it's over 14, it's going to be a minimum of 10, and over 28, and an ounce, 25. For what we call possession with intent to distribute, it's regardless of the amount. This is if you're selling it, or if you have it and packaged in such a way, or it's clear that what someone intended to do was sell it or distribute it. The penalties for Schedule 1 and 2. Schedule 1 would be, for example, heroin. Schedule 2 is cocaine and methamphetamine, but also can include things like oxycodone. A 5 to 30-year sentence. Now, there's no minimum amount of time to be served. That could all be served on probation. But that is the sentence. The second offense for that is 10 to 40 or life. For Schedule 3 through 4, alprazolam, 3 through 5, excuse me, alprazolam is Schedule 4, all your benzodiazepines are generally going to be Schedule 4. It's 1 to 10. Marijuana, possession with intent to distribute, or possession of more than an ounce is 1 to 10. And again, all those can be served on probation. They can also be end up in prison. Now, since we're in high school, not everybody's over the age of 17. People who might go to a juvenile court, how that's going to get dealt with over there is a little bit different. Once you turn 17, and a lot of people here are going to, hopefully turn 17 and go on to college and the workforce, you need to be aware of what you're facing with that. And this is before we even talk about things like what you have to do on probation, the costs and fines associated with it. The penalties for just possessing these various drugs, it varies based on how much of drugs, what someone's criminal history is, and it would take too long in our format here to get through each individual situation. Y'all may already know this, but it's important to understand what a felony record can do to your future or to your child's future. You can't vote unless you can get your rights restored. You can't own a gun. It's going to affect your ability to get credit, get a mortgage, get a car loan, rent someplace, get a job, get a security clearance, get a scholarship, get into college. And employers these days, court records can be public records. And unless something is sealed or otherwise expunged, employers can find that out, even if they're not asking you. Competent, qualified legal defense counsel, and there are many fine lawyers here in Cobb County that can easily run into 5 figures to defend a case. I think Dr. Dudley could probably speak to this as well, but effective, competent, reliable, reputable treatment is not cheap. In Cobb County, we're very fortunate we have drug treatment court. Many of the people who end up getting arrested for drug offenses, particularly those who are arrested for possession level offenses, can go through drug treatment court. and it's we'll call it accountability court. The manner of plea, they may go on probation before a plea is entered. They go through a process that's designed to encourage them to work with their opportunities to fight through their addiction and lead a sober life. And at the end, you're hoping that that's going to work without necessity of prison time, without necessity, in some cases, of felony record. Not every county has that. The drug court here in Cobb County is a nationwide model, and we're very fortunate to have that. I do want to mention just a couple of things. I was asked to address what's called the overdose amnesty provision. It does exist in Georgia, but especially for the students here, y'all may be going out of state once you graduate from here. Not every state has an amnesty provision, or if they do, it may be different. So this only applies to what's here. It is limited to possession offenses, not possession with intent or trafficking offenses, and it doesn't prevent us from prosecuting somebody. It just limits our ability to use the evidence that we would get as the result of someone seeking medical assistance. That said, please do the right thing. If someone is in danger, if someone is suffering an overdose, call for help. I just wanted to wrap up with one other aspect of drug use. There are these dangers. We talked about the overdose dangers. There are other dangers as well. Many of the homicides and murders that happen in Cobb County are drug-related. Why? Because people who are buying or selling drugs are more likely than almost anybody else to carry large amounts of cash. They are targets for robbery. And then things can go very, very badly from there. It is not just dangerous in all the ways that we've heard about before. Can be immediately dangerous to be out there, whether using or selling. And one point I wanted to come back to, Dr. Dudley was talking about locking up your medicine cabinet, and that's for me. You cannot get a trial lawyer to shut up on time. When we think of drug dealing, think of people who are selling. But someone who goes into a medicine cabinet and takes 5 oxycodone that were lawfully prescribed to their parent and goes down the street to their friend and gives them one has just committed distribution of a Schedule II drug. That's 5 to 30 range. Or possession of intent to distribute, 5 to 30. Now, I'm not saying that anybody would want that to necessarily happen to that person. You understand that raiding a medicine cabinet and distributing it out to other people is not just minor. It's not minor in terms of what it can do to you, and it's not minor in terms of the legal consequences of it. Thank you all.
Well, those statistics were staggering and very frightening, but they are a reality, and it's important for us to realize that this is happening in our community. So, it's interesting when I try to talk to my son about stuff like this and I get the eyes rolling, like Dr. Dudley said, the eyes rolling like, Mom, I know. One of the reasons he does know is he said he's heard a lot about this at school, which leads us to our next speaker, Trey White. He's the founder of the Prevention Offensive and the Prevent Defense program, which brings young people who made poor choices regarding drugs and underage drinking and have had to face the consequences of those choices, including addiction and alcoholism, in classrooms to share their experiences. These volunteers share their experiences with the hope that none of our students will have to share the same experiences. For the past several years, Trey has been bringing members of the recovery community to talk to Walton Health classes. Students have provided feedback that the Prevent Defense program was a very informative and impactful program.
She said it all. I'm done. No. Anyway, well, I'm not a lawyer, though I've needed some in the past, and I'm not a psychologist or psychiatrist, and I've needed some in the past. So I don't have, the education that these two gentlemen have. I am a parent, but in a nutshell, I'm a garden variety alcoholic and an addict. And, I'm fortunate enough to have been in recovery for a long time, but, I had, legal issues and health issues and escaped death on a number of occasions. and legal ramifications. But over the years in recovery, you know, my profession had me, you know, teaching and coaching recreational sports to kids. And I'd always had this desire to talk to kids about my experience and having friends that were raising kids and you know, and I always had this you know, tug at my heart to do this. And a few summers ago, after spending a lot of time with a bunch of kids in a summer program, I finally decided that I needed to do it. And so I thought about the best way to reach kids. And what I did was I had to reflect on my own recovery. And, you know, for me to follow suggestions and start to do things differently, you know, I met people like me that I could identify with. And when I got to a point and I met people in the recovery community that I could identify with, I became more willing to listen and to try to do things differently. So I have tried to take that same model into health classrooms around Atlanta area. And you know, we've been here at Walton for a few years now. And what I do is I bring in recovering people of different ages and sizes, usually anywhere from 3 to 4 on a panel. And we sit right here on the edge of the stage and we put the classes right in front of us. And we don't use microphones. But we just kind of share our experience with them. And like she mentioned, in the hopes that they may not ever have to share our experience. You know, there was discussion of little kids, you know, when they're small, they listen to their parents more and they listen to authority figures. And what we know is as kids grow up, you know, they don't listen to, you know, policemen or lawyers or teachers or their parents as much. They listen to their peers or they listen to people they can identify with. And so, you know, I try to select, you know, I love to have people that actually went to the school, and that happens quite often. And the kids come in, and they come in and they share a little of their story. You know, I play a little bit of a teacher role, and I talk to them about some statistics. And you know, there's a whole lot of them that were on the board earlier. But when I started doing my research, simple thing came to mind to me, because when I'm in a room full of recovering people, and I ask, how many of you guys, you know, started, you know, partying with a little alcohol or weed when you were in high school, and literally every hand goes up. You know, I mean, there's Mary, the little old lady whose husband died at 63, and she started drinking sherry, and it got out of hand. But and she's a real person, by the way. But generally, this is what we see. And you know, that being said, you know, they come in and they talk about like the first time it happened. You know, my friend brought some weed over. It was his brother's birthday, and he stole it from him. Or, you know, I mean, there's just a number of different ways kids are introduced to drugs and alcohol. And when I started doing the research on, you know, what are the risk factors and so on and so forth, what I found was that long-term study, I believe it was a 20-year study finished 6 or 8 years ago, showed that a kid who picks up weed or alcohol before the age of 20 was 6.5 times more likely to have issues with addiction or alcoholism. 6.5 times greater. Okay. Now, on the other end of the research, those who didn't touch these substances until after the age of 20, addiction rates ran around 4%. It was a little bit less than 4%. So you do a little math and you come to roughly 25, 26% of those who pick up these two substances before the age of 20 are going to find themselves in trouble with addiction or alcoholism. 1 in 4. That is highly risky behavior. Another thing to consider is that in the research, they can't account for people who don't admit to having issues with addiction or alcoholism. Okay? There's other research that shows as much as 60% of people who are alcohol or drug dependent go to their grave that way and never address their issue. So conservatively, we can bump that risk rate. Man, my mouth's dry. from 25 to about 40%. 2 out of 5. Now, I can't tell you the number of parents friends of mine, who have told me when their son got caught with weed or their daughter drinking or whatever, well, it's not that big a deal because it's just weed or alcohol. 40% risk rate's pretty frightening. And we're just talking about the so-called, safe drugs. And, there's a particular treatment center that I visit on a regular basis, and the ages of the people in treatment there are between 20 and about 35 years old. And I talk to these guys, and I just can't, 95% of them started taking prescription drugs in high school. Getting passed around, things prescribed for anxiety and ADD treatment, and of course the opiates and the opioids. Okay? 2 out of 5. We use this metaphor where I have these cards, I think I have them here, and I have this ace of spades that represents addiction or alcoholism. And currently the statistic for someone who's seeking treatment for addiction or alcoholism, long-term recovery rates, making it to 5 years, are about 3 to 5% to make it to that benchmark of 5 years. Now it goes up about another 3 to 5% each time they seek help or treatment, which can come in really costly numbers, if they do indeed make it back. And then I use this other card, the Joker, to represent those who never address their issue in their lifetime. And this can look like a lot of things. This can look like maybe a lot of job issues or relationship issues and marriages, and maybe a DUI charge or a possession charge or two, and it's just never their fault. It's never their fault. And then there's these cards that represent, getting away with it. And I put these cards in front of them and I don't say a word, and they draw from the deck. And then we go around and, you drew the card, and talk about recovery rates and so on and so forth. And then I ask them the question, why did you take the card? And the answer is, because you put it in front of me. I made a decision when I was a kid, I wasn't ever going to do drugs. But it was in front of me. And it became less and less of a big deal, because so many of my peers in all kinds of friend groups were doing it. And it seemed like no big deal, And I commend you parents and adults for coming here tonight, because you're not living in the fantasy that it'll never happen to my kid. You're living in reality, because you're here to listen, and you're open-minded to what we're all offering here today. And it's so important. Real quick, I got two volunteers. Guys, just stand up and take a bow. These are 2 guys that share with the students, okay? And I hope to have more of them here. In the last 3 years, I've had almost 70 different volunteers from the recovery community share with students in schools throughout. And to my knowledge, only 2 of them have relapsed, okay? And, our program has, basically 3 parts, okay? First, we want to influence kids to make better decisions about drugs and alcohol by listening to our experience, okay? And then what we call the reality of the risk, which I represent with the statistics, okay? We're also trying to give the recovering person the opportunity to find value in his experience. And it's well documented that service work is a benchmark, is absolutely vital for long-term recovery. And then accidentally, we created a 3rd leg to our program, and that was early intervention. A teacher over at another school over at Lassiter asked the students to write a letter to our program, and that launched the response program. And in that response program, we have kids tell us what they thought about what they heard, what they learned that they didn't understand before, and they share with us. And you wouldn't believe the stuff that I've heard. And most importantly, we have kids that are asking for help. And we have some boundaries, but we just give them some information. Recommend that they see their school counselor, bring their parents into the mix if they're serious about it. But that's what we're doing here at Walton. Actually, we'll be here on Thursday, and we're in about 9 different Cobb County schools right now. But take this information, go visit our website, share it with your kids. We've done some one-on-ones with students, and we're more than welcome to do that. Over coffee. That's really like 3-on-1. We kind of gang up on them. But anyway, I just hope that you guys got something out of this tonight, and know that the recovering community wants to make a difference in the decisions that your kids are making. And that's all I got for you guys. Thanks.
Well, thank you. And thank you for coming here tonight to speak to us. And we also do have a former Walton student here tonight who is open to speaking to parents and students too. So thank you for coming here this evening. At this time, we'd like to ask the panel some questions. If you do have a question, please raise your hand, and you can write down a question on a note card, or we'll take questions from the audience. First, we do have some questions that were submitted prior to the evening starting, so I wanted to ask some of those questions if I could to start that out, because there's so much information to cover here. It's going to be hard to cover it all, but again, we'll do our best to answer a few questions now, and then afterwards, when we go out into the foyer, we can have more questions answered. Dr. Dudley, I've heard that students, and I've heard this about students, you mentioned it, sharing something like an Adderall, right, to help with studying and everything. What can we as parents do to recognize those signs that, like, we might not even know our student is doing that? What are those signs that might indicate there is an issue there?
Well, I think the first thing to look for is increasing isolation, that they're in their room more, or that they want to be gone more, or that they change their friends. I'm particularly anti-television sets in bedrooms because it encourages the isolation. So if the television or the computer is out in the family area, you're going to see more of the kid. And some withdrawal is normal in the adolescent years, but when it gets excessive, and the only thing you're hearing from your teenager when you say, "Where did you go out? What did you do? Nothing." That's a red flag. So be in conversation, and also realize that you can't teach because that's preach. You can only provide information, and if you want to get some information to an adolescent, you have a better shot at getting some handout somewhere and laying it around the house. But they're not likely to hear it from you.
So, is there a cool way teens can say no to drugs or alcohol at a party? Because there is so much peer pressure. Do you have some ideas, or Missy, do you, or Trey, do you have ideas? What are some things kids can say, some tools that they can have, to help them handle that peer pressure and walk away?
Depending on what activities they're involved in, they can always say that those activities are more important to them than getting kicked out of a situation, especially sports, those kind of things. They're working toward a scholarship and they don't want to blow it. And then, I think kids are getting more comfortable saying that they don't care to take drugs because they don't like the way they don't like the way they make them feel. They don't like the way alcohol tastes. I think kids are becoming more apt to be able to say that because after all, we've been teaching them how to do that in the schools and whatnot for years and years and years. So I know that two of my children actually called me at parties and said, "Mom, this party is going in a direction I don't want it to go. I need you to come and get me." So that's what I say.
And I've given my kids a safe word. If you call and wrap that word into conversation. When you're on your cell phone, I'll know right away to come and get you, no questions asked. So I know it is challenging. There's a parent that would be interested in hearing, I'm very interested in hearing about this too, and this would be for you, Greg. Your opinion on legalization of marijuana. Is it smart or disastrous?
Oh, well, yeah, go right. You know, I would actually, what I would say about that is first, you know, I want to remind everybody, even though marijuana has been legalized, and everybody hear me? I'm not sure this is doing all right. Okay. Legalized in other states, and there have been, they call it marijuana oil. There's actually a more technical term for it, that they're been approved for certain medical uses. Please everyone remember that marijuana is still illegal in the state of Georgia in any amount. My personal experience, speaking for myself, from what I have seen, it is not healthy to use, and not just because it's often smoked. It is not healthy. It is not going to contribute to good development in any sense, and it might not lead to other drugs or other addictions, but it can. And really, I think actually, Mr. White and Dr. Dudley probably could offer more about that than I can.
Well, you know, if you're using marijuana, you're at least around people that are in possession of illegal substances, and how many of you want to hang out with someone that's already a criminal? It's probably not going to benefit your life very much. So any use is probably problematic. I want to make a point on an earlier question about prevention, and that is I always invite the middle schoolers to think about a conversation that they haven't had to have yet. I always ask them, have you thought about what you will say or what you will do the first time one of your friends in middle school gives you an opportunity to try some alcohol or some weed? Have you thought about that conversation? And if they are open and willing to talk about that possibility, it really helps to have the conversation in your head ahead of time, because on the spot, if you haven't thought about the exact thing you're going to say, the exact thing you're going to do, it's a crapshoot. So to the extent that you can encourage kids to explore what they would do and what they would say, it has a benefit.
Trey, can Cobb staff refer students to your program?
I'm sorry, what was that?
Can Cobb staff, can they refer students to your program?
In what respect? As far as bringing the program into another school, or?
I'm not 100% sure, but maybe if a parent is concerned and wants to get involved, or if they would like to bring it to another school, can they reach out?
Oh,
to
absolutely, yeah. We're always looking, to be in other classrooms, and did a forum. I've done forums like this at Lassiter and Pope, and in both of those locations, I had parents reach out to me, and we met with the student, and who was, well, actually one of them had already graduated from high school. We met with the student, and of course, he assured us that he had everything under control. But again, we're here to help. Especially, the thing about help is, the one that's in trouble needs to want it. And that's where the real struggle is as a parent, because you get the, I know, I'll never do it again, and da-da-da-da-da, and I put my parents through the ringer over the stuff. And I do want to make a mention of the marijuana thing. Despite being legalized, the long-term studies are in, the stuff is not good for you. And, I had the thought that I was never going to do it, as I mentioned a little while ago, but, it's not one decision. I had to make that, I needed to make that decision time and time and time again. And I didn't have anybody like going, come on, man, do it. I didn't experience that kind of peer pressure. Peer pressure happened between my ears, so it's a series of decisions. And because I got to know the reality of the risk. I've got to know the reality of the risk, or I'm not going to make the decision. So yes, we are open to come into classrooms. We do meet with, and we give referrals to counselors and so on and so forth too.
I'd like to build on something that you touched on. And when we first started this Substance Abuse Awareness Committee in our discussions, one thing that was brought up that we haven't been able to touch on tonight is the issue of mental illness and how that might play into drug addiction and stuff, and how we as parents, you don't have to address that tonight, but again, just talking to those students that might be, maybe they're depressed or have anxieties, or suffering like the beginnings of some sort of addiction, and they don't want help. They, as a parent, that's a very frustrating thing. It's very hard. You feel very helpless. What can parents do?
You want me to take it?
See, it's a hard question, isn't it?
What's the question again?
What do we as parents do when our child really is resisting, and we know when we talk about other things, sometimes they'll resist no matter what we say. Sometimes you want to do the complete opposite with your child, knowing that'll get them to do something, but really when we are concerned and really worried about our child and they will not listen to us, who can we reach out to that, as a trusted someone in confidence for the child? How do we take those first steps as a parent to get help for our child?
I like his program, right? Invite him to the child's school and provide that information. The thing that I see over and over again is that the parents are powerless to affect that. And providing information that the child will listen to almost always has to come from another source. So if you can find out what person your child, your adolescent may have hired as a consultant, and that's what adolescents do. They find a couple of adults that are good listeners, that are smart enough to keep their mouths shut. And if you can find out who that person is for your child, sometimes it's a scout leader, sometimes it's a youth minister, sometimes it's a favorite teacher, they may be willing and able to talk to that person. And if you can arrange for that, that gives you an increased chance.
Thank you. Can we get some clarification, please, Greg? Will someone under 17 years of age be subject to a minimum of 5 years if giving drugs to a friend? And before 20 years old, is it 6.5? I'm sorry.
That's my question.
Can you ask it?
I just wanted to know, so, because I think that's what we're all hearing about, is the kids are talking about, they're taking the Ritalin, the Xanax, some of the ADHD meds. So, if they take it from like their sister or brother, and then go and give it to a friend, and then it all comes out, those kids are under 17, do they go into how does that get handled? Because this is, 3/4 of what we're talking about here at Walton, as far as the population.
Sure. So generally speaking, if they're under 17, that's going to go to juvenile court. So the numbers I was giving you before are the penalties if someone is being prosecuted in superior court, they're over 17, and therefore by law treated as an adult for purposes of criminal prosecution. So juvenile court is a different environment. Certainly people are not, for something like this, they're not going to be sent to adult prison, you're not going to Jackson for that. But what the juvenile court can do, they have a wide range of programs geared towards addiction. They can use confinement, but juvenile court is much more oriented toward treatment and trying to, and not just for drug offenses, for everything, trying to get someone on a better track rather than strictly focusing on punishment. One thing, if I don't, we're going to take 1 minute and mention real quick in terms of the previous question that Dr. Dudley was talking about, just anecdotally, when we're in a courtroom and we see 17, 18, 19, 20-year-old person in there for a drug offense, for simple possession, you would not believe how many times they're in there by themselves. Most of the time, the vast majority of the time, or who's with them? Their friends. And Also, anecdotally speaking, although the parents, they all will be able to do so much, and they often feel powerless, as Dr. Dudley was saying, the number of times when there are parents there, and parents who are clearly going to be there every time there's a court hearing, be paying attention, asking questions and involved, we tend not to see those people a second time, and not to see them for probation violations.
Can you talk also about the golden triangle of heroin here in Cobb County? Like, what is that, and what is law enforcement doing regarding that?
They're going to hear me without this because I'm feeling bad for Mr. Tabley here, so running around back and forth. Is everybody able to hear all right?
We do, so
Okay.
that we record it, we can hear it.
Ah, gotcha, okay. Golden Triangle runs, roughly speaking, from south of downtown Atlanta, roughly up to 75, maybe 85 corridors. You will also hear about the Golden Triangle in Asia, where a lot of the heroin actually comes from. That's obviously something different, but that is, if you Google Golden Triangle, that's what you might get first. That is an area where there is a tremendous amount of heroin, and there are, and to respond to the question, part of the question about what's being done, there are multiple federal agencies. We work through MCS with federal partners and DEA, primarily DEA and Homeland Security, because anything that touches the border, Homeland Security can be involved in, to try and investigate and disrupt, arrest the people involved in those drug trafficking organizations. Because that is an area where heroin use has just exploded, along the lines of what I was talking about before. And Atlanta is, unfortunately, not only a center for drug abuse, it is a major transit point for drug distribution coming into this country and being distributed really all over the country, but particularly through the southeast and up the eastern seaboard.
Well, we're going to have to stop it there for right now, but we can answer more questions outside afterwards. But before we finish tonight, I know, Senator, you'd like to say a few words. If you could join us up here, that would be
I don't
great.
need to come up there. I can just stand here, right?
You got to come up here. Wait, maybe this one. This one will be together.
Yeah, I just want to thank you guys for coming and talking to the Walton community about this. We need to be doing this all over the state and raising awareness. This problem has finally gotten the attention that it deserves, and there are a lot of people working on this. And it's going to take all of us. It's going to take state government, law enforcement, teachers, the recovery community, the medical community, and prescribing is going down, but our problems with overdose deaths are not going down. So just a couple things I wanted to mention. One is about disposal, and I don't know if you guys were going to talk about that, but basically what you have to do, you can't flush the pills down the toilet. It gets in the water supply. It's not good. The fish will get high. No, I'm just kidding. And what you have to do is crush up the pills and mix them with something like kitty litter, kitchen compost, or something like that before you throw them away. So that's if you're doing it at home. There's lots of take-back places. The police stations will take them back. CVS is starting to put drop boxes in all their pharmacies. DEA has their National Take-Back Day on October 28th, and there are locations for that, so you can go to DEA Take-Back. But we need to get these drugs out of our medicine cabinets. You know, I'm a surgeon. People take 2 pills after surgery, or 6 pills, and then the rest of them are just sitting in the medicine cabinet, and they need to disappear and not into our school system. The only other thing I was going to say is just to make you aware of naloxone. Narcan is a common name. It's very widely available now, and our governor and our Dr. Brenda Fitzgerald, who was the head of public health, signed a standing order that basically anybody can get naloxone. The first responders carry it. It's a nasal spray. It's very easy to use. Missy may want to talk about that a little bit. But bottom line is, if you're in a situation with someone who's overdosed, the very first thing you do is call 911 and then worry about the naloxone. So I don't know, Missy, if you wanted to comment on that. But we got to stay the course and all work together on this, and we're going to beat it.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Kay. I will say one thing about naloxone. It is available at the zone. if you'll come by the zone, we do hand it out for free to people who are in need. And if you think that you have someone who is abusing opioids in your family, then you're certainly in need. And I will tell you that in 2016, Cobb County had the second most overdose deaths in the state of Georgia. And we were second only to Fulton County. And everybody knows that's home of the Bluffs. So we do have a real problem here. And we'll be glad to give anybody in need of naloxone a free. We do have the Narcan kits. And it is a nasal spray. It's very easy to use. It looks like Afrin. Stick it up the nose, push the thumb in, and you're done. So, but I will say, after you give that drug, it is very, very, very vitally important that you did call 911 before you gave that dose, because there is a risk of going back into the overdose because of the half-life on the Narcan. So the heroin oftentimes, or the fentanyl or carfentanil, will outlive the dose of Narcan that is received, and they can go straight back into the overdose state. So it is important to transport to the hospital anytime Narcan is administered.
Thank you. At this time, we will be going out in just a moment. I was going to touch on the drug take-back day. It is October 28th. So Kennesaw Police will be, they have a take-back day is at the CVS on Cobb Parkway in Kennesaw. And also year-round, you can drop off your drugs, like the Senator said, at several of the police stations, but Marietta and Kennesaw, and Ackworth will take them all year round. So it's really important to do that. And please lock your medicine cabinets. If you don't have one, please buy one, because that is a great way to also prevent, and sometimes it's not just your kids, but it's your friends' kids going into your medicine cabinet. So that's really important to know. I'd like to take this, do you want to say something else?
One more comment, if I might. I'd be remiss if I didn't point out the tremendous difficulty in accessing adequate treatment. When I began practice almost 40 years ago, it was routine, if you had an addiction problem, that you'd get 28 days of inpatient care to get started on sobriety. I haven't been able to do that for over 10 years.
Well, I hope you can join me in thanking our panelists tonight.